Assalamu alaikum friends and welcome back to the channel. My name is Younes Charfaoui and in this video I'm going to share with you some of the interview questions you need to prepare when applying for Android position. Let's get started. So this interview question will be around Android, about Kotlin and about Jetpack Compose. So the interviewer will expect you to have knowledge in all of this stuff, especially if you are applying in Android positions that require Jetpack Compose. So the first question is, what is recomposition? Like, what is recomposition in Compose, right? So here you may respond in different ways. You may say that recomposition is simply, in terms of the Compose compiler and Compose runtime, is simply calling the composable function with a different input. But what is that input? Usually it's a state. And when this state changes, Compose will know that it needs to recall this function, because at the end of the day, these composables are functions, right? And someone needs to call these functions, which is the compose runtime. So by reacting to the state change, recalling the function one more time, adding it to the compose tree, this is the process of recomposition. So it depends on the level that the interviewer is asking, whether to describe something deep or something as simple as reacting to the state changes. Okay, this is in a nutshell what is a recomposition. You can also describe the different phases that Compose run through in order to draw something on the UI, right? Usually we have three different stages, or three different steps, which is recomposition or composition, and then layout, and then drawing. Right? So recomposition is only in the first step, right? Reacting to the changes. So it can, of course, do the other stuff, relayouting and also redrawing. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? Sometimes you can skip recompositions, but of course need to have to relayout and redrawing, right? The next question is, what are side effects in Compose? This is a critical concept to understand, right? So side effect in Compose, if you recall this recomposition stuff, recomposition can happen for many reasons, right? So it is not unpredictable, but it can happen for any reason. So let's say in your composable function, you are doing stuff that aren't related to the compose word, that aren't related to the drawing or the UI or the composition state, right? You are changing some kind of state outside the scope of this composable function. Let's take, for example, a simple example. Let's say whenever we are launching our composable screen, I need to show a snack bar or a simple message at the end of the screen, right? This one will happen only once, right? When we are adding this to the composable tree, right? But I don't want to run it every time this is recomposing, okay? So we are separating what it is changing because of recomposition from what is not changing, right? This is called side effects, okay? And Compose should be side effect free. That's why we have an API that is called Effects API, in which you have many side effects, such as the normal side effect, launched effect, remember coroutine scope. We do have disposable effect and many others. I already have a playlist on the side effects in my YouTube channel. Next, you may get a question on what is the difference between certain side effects. For example, what is the difference between launched effect and disposable effect? Here you need to understand what is the particularities about each side effect. For example, launched effect, from its term, it's launched only in the beginning when we add this composable to the composition tree, okay? Let's say we are in the moment of calling it. Here, the beauty is that you get a coroutine scope, so you can run coroutine-based functions. This is a cool thing, for example, like displaying snack bar. Usually displaying snack bar, we require a suspendable function, for example. And here the key thing is that whenever this key changes, I need to re-execute this launched effect, okay? For example, if you want to re-execute this thing whenever a message, a value, a property changes, this will re-execute, you can pass it here. Otherwise, if you don't want that, like it will be static, simple one event, you can use something that isn't changing. True, for example, unit, stuff like that. This is the launched effect. Disposable effect is, on the other side, is kind of the same thing, right? It will accept the key that it will run, but the main difference is that this will give you a block where you can do some cleanup. So whenever you have some effects that require cleanup, when leaving the composition, of course, so you can use it. You can have a method called onDispose, and here you can execute it, and the same key apply, the same mantra about keys. So if this changes, this will need to re-execute, right? So giving it true, it means it will run one time only, okay? The next question, let's talk about some design questions, some open-ended question. This is a cool question also, is let's say we have a feature, in Google Chrome that is called close all tabs. This is what do I mean by this feature, which is close all incognito tabs, right? Sometimes you are running a lot of anonymous tabs, right? And then suddenly you can go off the application and close all of them from here directly, from a press of a notification. Like, this is a question on how to design this feature, and also shows the proficiency of the candidates about the APIs we have in Android. So how we can implement this feature. Maybe they will ask you on how to implement it, what are the different implementation details. So this is crucial. Okay, so how do we design a feature like that? So basically here we are going to have a notification. So whenever we are starting a new incognito tab, for example, this is the first thing, is that how do we model this tab? It might be just a data class about the current URL, for example, and then you can have a list of those tabs in Chrome. And then you can have two different types, of course, normal tabs and incognito tabs, right? And then we can, whenever we are starting one of these things, one of these tabs, we can launch a notification. This notification will be persistent, like you can't cancel it. And then when the user click on it, here we can design it in multiple ways. One of the ways to do that while with a pending intent is just to fire up an event, okay? This event can be broadcast receiver, that would work fine, okay? It can be within a service, right? This is also can work, like you can have a foreground service, especially you can run this, what we call it, notification in foreground service. So this way you are getting an information about the APIs that the candidate know, right? Like whenever he say foreground service, it means he knows about that. You may also get clues from the interviewer. You may ask him whether you want to implement it with broadcast receiver, maybe with something else. It will depend on you, of course. Now, whenever we have this event, we can go to that list, for example, the list of the tabs, and go to the list of incognito tabs and empty it and cancel all those. Like, this is a question about design of feature, and you can implement it in many ways. Just be prepared for this kind of open-ended question to know the ability of the candidates and also to know what the interviewer wants from you, right? In this question, usually the interviewer wants to know about what is your design process, what are the APIs you know in Android that can accomplish this feature. Okay, and you may get some questions about whether foreground service is a good one for this one, maybe broadcast receiver is a bad thing, maybe you get a question about what are pending intents, why they are different from normal intents. So all of this question arise when discussing such open questions like that. The next question is, what is the difference between shared flow and state flow? Okay, first you might get the question, what is a flow? Simply, a flow is a simple data stream, but it is asynchronous. This is a cool thing, right? Now, what is the difference between shared flow and between state flow? Well, both are hot streams or hot flows, right? What is the difference between hot flows and cold flows? Hot flows will emit values whether there is subscribers or not, and cold flows will not emit values unless there is a subscriber. This is the first thing. Now, both shared flow and state flow are hot flows, right? Now, the state flow will have always something called the latest value because it is state flow, like it have a state. Okay, so we use it generally whenever we have a state in our app and we are representing it, so it can be observed either throughout the app. Okay, usually we use it in view model to represent UI state, for example. That's a valid use case. Shared flow is a little bit general, and usually it's used across many collectors, right? And the beauty is that you can broadcast multiple values to multiple subscribers. This is the main use case we use it for. And also you can reply many recent states. You can use the reply count of 3, for example, and what will happen whenever there's a new subscriber to this shared flow, it will receive the latest 3 values. Okay, this is a different use case from the state flow. Okay, so this is the main difference. Shared flow is for emitting multiple values to multiple subscribers. That's the first one. But state flow is usually to emit and observe one value. Also can be to multiple subscribers, but a lot of cases it's only for one subscriber. Usually, as I said, we use it in the view model. Next question about compose. This is also an open-ended question. Sometimes the interviewer will ask you to talk about a modifier of your choice, right? You can grab any modifier in the list of modifiers, and here you can talk about a modifier of your choice. Maybe you run into a situation where you needed that modifier, so you can explain it, okay? Explain the case and everything. This question is about your experience with compose, right? The interviewer wants to know what is your experience, whether you run into some special cases, whether you are understanding what you are doing with these modifiers and everything. For example, you can go, well, this is beauty. There are many modifiers. This is the beauty of compose. You can talk about anything. For example, I remember I can talk about this one. I remember I used, this is the first days of Compose. I remember I used something called on globally positioned. Yeah, on globally positioned. I first used this modifier when I made the video about Compose Desktop. You can see that there is a button that changes whenever you go with the mouse to it, right? So this one, I needed it in order to get the layout coordinates. When this element, usually we apply modifiers to UI elements, of course. So this will give you coordinates after the element is being laid out on the screen, okay? So this will give you layout coordinates you can use to initialize or know what are the current coordinates, so you can update from there. There are many modifiers, so just be prepared with a modifier you know and you can comfortably talk with, okay? Some people would love to talk about compose modifier. There's also a great modifier to apply certain stuff, right? So it depends on your case and it depends on your experience. But this is the thing, try to tell the interviewer that you know about modifiers and you can describe things in a detailed manner so they can get an understanding that you know Compose well. Next question also about modifiers is what are the difference between modifiers that end up with, for example, if you take offset, there is an offset that end up with parentheses like that and offset that end up with brackets like following or curly brackets, right? What is the difference? Now, like you are going to see it in a lot of modifiers. Not all modifiers have this thing, but many of them have this variation. Now, the main difference is about performance, right? This will cause recomposition and, of course, relayout and redraw. This will not cause recomposition. So we can skip recomposition using this kind of modifiers, right? So whenever you are updating the UI, for example, animation or certain stuff, you can skip recomposition, and by that, you improve the performance. This is one of the ways to improve performance in Compose. You might get questioned differently. What are the different ways to improve performance in Compose? You can reply with this one. This is a cool thing also. Next question about Compose. Also, what is remembering in Compose? Why do we need remembering in the first place? Why? There is a function called remember, and then there is a mutable state of. Of course, mutable state of is just a way to tell Compose that this is mutable, right? But why do we have to remember it? Okay, this question is about recomposition, of course. So by doing recomposition, we are calling function multiple times. And by calling functions, right, the variable in function, this is a test team, right? This is a function. This is a function, it has this thing, right? So for the first time, this will have the value of true. But if it is changed during the application, we need to retain the state. We need to tell Compose that the next time when you are recomposing, just remember this one, okay? So the next execution of the function, we don't want this to be re-executed with this true. I want the remembered version, okay? This is why we have remembered, okay? Sometimes the interviewer wants to know whether you understand what is happening inside, okay? So describing this thing with, you can also add things like compose runtime, compose compiler to this kind of answers, so you can get more chances, okay? You might get also question what is the difference between normal remember and remember by, like that. So here in the value you are getting to get a state, right? You are going to get state, and that state have something called value, so you can use it here. By doing the by here, right, we are getting this state by delegation, right? So I can directly access what is the value here. This is why we have remember, and what is the difference between remember by and normal remember. Next question, which is a little bit advanced question, is what is the refight keyword in Kotlin? Why do we use it? Why do we need it? Okay, so let's say I'm having a function, right? And this function is accept a type parameter. Let's call it hello function, like the following, right? And I can use t here as the type. For example, it can be a data, and this can be a t here, right? Now, if you want to access what is the type of t, this one, what is the class of t, I can, for example, I can save the type in order to do things with it. Usually, you won't have this information. Why you won't have this information? It's because of Java, right? So it will tell you like, cannot use t as a refight parameter. Use a class instead. So if, let's say you want to know what is the type, so you can maybe serialize it or maybe like do basic stuff on it. How do you get information about such a type? You use something called refight keyword. Refight keyword like that. But the problem with refight, it doesn't work immediately, right? You need to do other stuff to the refight. You need to make it inline function, okay? So both this thing, refight and inline, are part of the question. Why do we need inlining? Now here it depends really on the interviewer what he wants to know. Maybe he wants to know internal stuff, So he wants to know what is your abilities, understanding stuff, right? So he wants to understand why we have inline with the refi, okay? I already explained this in one of the previous videos on my channel about the refi keyword. You can check it, but simply you can, let's open a Kotlin file, ff, for example. Let's just use this one here. Okay, what's the problem? Okay, yeah, let me delete it from here. I want just to show you what is happening. Here you can do the following. Here you can do the following. You can call a main function. This is just for explanation. I know you can do that in Android. Here you can call the function hello, and you can pass the value of 5, right? And within this T class, I'm going just to print the type. Now, notice what will happen. Why do we need inlining, right? What do we mean by inlining? It simply means I'm going to copy this one and replace it here. This is inlining, okay? This is inlining. Now, what will happen at the hood, if you go to the Kotlin and go to show Kotlin bytecode and do a decompilation, this is interesting, right? You're going to see the value of hello. This is an object, fine, okay? But what is happening at the main? There is no hello here at all. What is happening is that we are doing inlining. So what is doing is that we are copying this code and pasting it here, like that. While doing pasting, not pasting, while doing aligning, we are getting what is the actual type being passed, which is 5. At that moment, I can copy what is the type. This is the thing. You are going to see integer here directly in the code, right? In the Java code. It's not at the runtime. So this is why it is align. You can check a video in my channel, which is Kotlin for Beginners, about refi to get more understanding. Okay? So this is why we use the refi keyword. Another question related to generics, Kotlin and Java in general, you might get asked what is type erasure, or you may get an example. Let's take an example here. Maybe you can get it as an example. Let's call it ff again, right? Let's say I'm having a function called foo, and in this function it accepts a data, which is simple list of a string, okay? This is the first thing. Then I'm going to do some kind of overloading, right? This overloading, not overriding. I'm going to have the same function, but with int, okay? And here you might get the question whether this code will compile or not, or they can ask you, what do you know about something called type erasure, or what will be the output of this one. Here what will happen is something, a phenomenon called the type erasure. This happens in Java and Kotlin. The reason is that at the moment of compilation, what will happen is that you are going to delete this one, and you are going to delete this one, okay? Because in generics, real generics under the hood, because it was added to Java 5, so previously we didn't have generics, right? We have to use object. So what will happen is that the type will be erased. That's why we call it type erasure. So we will have same signature function of list and list. And this wouldn't work because they are the exact same thing. Here it should show an error. I don't know why it's showing. I think if you go to the tools, Kotlin, show bytecode, exactly here, I think exactly you are having an error. It will tell you like platform declaration clash, right? The following declaration have the same JVM signature. You see, it's JVM signature, right? So you are talking about the bytecode here. You can solve this problem by just renaming one function. Now, if you do the decompilation, you won't have this issue, right? Decompile it, everything is fine. You can do another thing, another cool thing. Here it will have problem. You can do something called add JVM name, and here you can name it foo2. Once you do that, you won't have any problem, okay? Because with the JVM name, you are going to have two functions, the normal foo2 and foo, okay? But in terms of coding in the Kotlin, you can still have the same foo. You can call it with the foo here normal. Foo here, you can call it and provide what is the type, and then from the type inference, it will know which foo you are calling. Okay, sorry for this naming of foo. This is the usual example of functions. All right, this is called type erasure, and this is an advanced problem. Actually, it's not that advanced. The real point of this question is to know what is the experience of the developer, right? If he have some kind of 5-year or 6-year of experience, the interviewer suspect that you will run into this kind of issues, right? Even if you don't run them, you are going to read about them, you are going to hear about them in certain problems, right? So judging the experience by this kind of questions is also a good thing. Finally, let's conclude with one or two open-ended questions. You may get asked, how can we add an offline mode to an application? You can describe your application, what the application is doing and everything, and then they can tell you how you can add offline. Now, depending on the application itself, you can talk about stuff like database, like shared preferences, how you can put things offline, and also maybe how to synchronize it. So then you can talk about things like work managers, things like alarm managers, stuff like that. So it depends on the application and the context, right? But be prepared for this kind of open-ended question in which the interviewer really needs some implementation stuff, right? Now, with this implementation stuff, you want to know what are your thinking, your ability in terms of Android thinking, what are the frameworks we have, and how we can use them. This is really a cool thing. Another question you may get also about testing, right? Usually the interviewer wants to know what are your skills in testing. He can maybe give you a scenario and he will tell you how do we test that, right? Maybe the usual example, let's say you are having a view model and this view model requires coroutine-based stuff to request things from offline, from database or from remote, and you are going to use background stuff. How can we test the view model so we can control this coroutine in the test, right? Here, the interviewer wants specific thing on how to design the view model. Basically, here the answer is to inject a dispatcher, and from the test, you can control this dispatcher, and you can use this dispatcher in the view model to control the concurrency stuff and the background stuff, okay? But it can be anything, right? It can be anything related to tests. So be prepared in this really depends on the experience. So how many problems you run into, this is experience in general, right? The amount of problems you solve during your career, right? So if you have good experience, long experience, right? Even if you read about it, right? You are going to encounter many scenarios, many problems at testing. At that moment, you can have solutions. For example, you can search them online, and then at the moment of interview, you know what are the different solutions for the different problem. But if you don't have experience, of course, you are not going to answer this question. So this is a way to judge the candidate experience in testing and overall experience, right? They may ask you generic questions such as how we test an offline mode, how do we test room databases, how we test retrofit, want to know whether you know something called mock web server. So sometimes the questions are designed to know what are the APIs you know. Sometimes it's about thinking on how to do that. And even you may propose a solution, they can counter it. Maybe this will be slow, how can we make it faster? And this kind of back and forth questions. So this is basically it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching this video to the end. I hope you get some questions here on how to prepare them. Actually, if you like those questions, there is a PDF below in which you have more than 100 questions with the answers, of course, so you can download it for free for the moment. Thank you very much for watching this video to the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and always see you in the next videos. Salam alaikum.